afternoon, and today we have Shubhra Raje for my next interview on women in architecture. Thank you, Shubhra, for agreeing to take this interview, and I look forward to a very wonderful conversation. And we will start with where you were born and what kind of upbringing you had, which led you to join architecture as a discipline.
So I was born in Bombay. I think my parents were already living here in Ahmedabad, but both my grandparents were in Bombay. So Bombay is actually my ancestral city. I didn't know my paternal grandparents very well. We were very close to my maternal, my mother's family, basically. Also because my father was very good friends with his in-laws. There was not a very big age difference between them. So we were brought up I would actually say, when looking back these days especially, in a very progressive sort of an environment. Also slightly atheist, rationalist in a sense.
Yes.
So
knowing your father,
yes, and my grandfather was even more so.
Okay.
So there was a certain kind of a scientific rigor, scientific method, a sort of atmosphere where we could laugh at superstitions and dogmas and rituals. And as we sort of started growing up, curiosity was more important rather than saying, I don't remember ever being said, don't do this. But very, very sort of vividly I remember, having done something, we were left to ourselves to face the consequence. That was the deal, basically. That with choice comes consequences.
More like it's your problem.
Yeah, so you have to know that in choice making you have all the freedom, but then you're pretty much on your own to deal with the consequences. But that was good learning. In Ahmedabad, of course, the environment was very architectural since both my parents were architects. And my mother also began working, I feel, very close to when I was born. So although she, of course, we never felt that either she or my father were never there for us, I always knew my mum actually as a working person. And I remember liking that about our family, because at that point in school, not many students had working mothers.
Yes.
And somehow, since we were always brought up fairly independently, and I was very close to my elder sister, who's about 2 years older, we actually didn't mind our time. So we were latchkey kids, so we came home ourselves. There was nobody to sort of independent. And somehow, I don't know, personality, a little bit of nurturing, so the way we were brought up, but I actually heartily enjoyed it. Don't remember missing, in a sense, that I don't remember ever telling my mother, don't go to work or some such. So that was in Ahmedabad, very architectural. Sometimes my sister and I would visit, my father's office by that time was at the IIM. So it was a really nice place to hang out as well. So we didn't have to be in the office, we could be on the campus and climbing on these arches and double arches. I mean, we explored the environment.
You were living through the architecture.
Yeah, these were playgrounds. All these iconic works were actually playgrounds. Never consciously thinking about architecture as a profession or a very loaded sort of discipline. And same thing with CEPT, because my father would go teach there, and sometimes if my mother had work in the office, my father had sort of, what is it called? Babysitting duty. So I remember my sister and I having a really nice time on the North Lawns, and again it was a campus where you could run around and play and things of that sort. So this is the way we really discovered some of the architecture in Ahmedabad. Because my parents worked a lot and a lot of their projects were out of Ahmedabad, they made it a point that twice a year we always travel together as a family. So that time we started discovering all all sorts of places in India, from of course Mandu and things of that sort, Rajasthan, South. Part architectural, part having fun. Both my parents were very interested in other things, whether it was food. My mother was very interested in textiles because her family were milliners, so they came from a textile background. So it was not necessarily only go to architecture.
But you were living through it.
Yeah, and what was really interesting about our upbringing was we were always encouraged to make connections. So it was never one discipline or another discipline, but the fact that what is continuous through it is life.
And I think that's important also to understand that architecture is at the core of these, because we are talking about built environment per se. So we are living through it anyways.
Absolutely.
It's about when we realize.
Yeah. And the environment bit, whether it's built, unbuilt, whether it's in terms of objects and products and fabrics, cultures also. So building cultures or product cultures, all that we were made very aware of. My mother and my maternal grandfather heavily interested in music, Hindustani music, and my father and my maternal grandmother very interested in cinema, so visual culture. So we benefited from that as well. When I think about it, as an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old, in the summer vacations, we were deposited in Bombay. During the vacations,
education happened there until school.
No, my first 4 years education happened in Ahmedabad, and after that we went to boarding school.
Okay.
In the south, which was also something my sister and I were very happy about. Rather than it being this culture of, sometimes kids feel abandoned when parents and I think it worked out because, like I said, my parents were traveling a lot, Bhopal and all, there were a lot of projects with them. But in the summer vacations, I remember as an 8-year-old and 9-year-old going to screenings of Artha Satya and things of that sort. But my grandmother would say, if they don't like it, we'll walk out of it. So that was always the attitude. With my grandfather or my mother going to music concerts, and Hindustani music concerts generally are at night. And if we said, that, no, especially me, if I said, no, but I feel sleepy, or we would moan about it a bit, they would always say, yeah, but then go to sleep then. Somewhere it will get into you.
Yes, exactly.
So this was the kind of upbringing. We were never left behind when grown-ups went and did their thing. We were always tagged along. Even if my sister and I were the only kids, we were always tagged along. And so even that awe of adulthood of any sort was taken away very young. And of course some of the friends would end up being architects. And the conversation, even when very small, would, at least there was a familiarity because it was going on around you. And I think over time, I remember even when in company of adults, these adults would have no problem, turning around and saying, so what do you think? So from very early on, we were sort of always taught to engage. Don't check out. And thankfully at that time there were no video games or technology. But even books, we were encouraged that during social times, participate a little bit. Don't withdraw into just your book or something. So
that was a different time altogether because human interaction was given quite a lot of weightage. And also in architecture, it makes a lot of sense when we look at it. I would like to know, did you really decide to join architecture, or was there some kind of a session or some kind of situation?
No, in fact it was the other way around. It was the other way around where my parents were very frank when they said that if you are interested in architecture, you will have to deal, in a sense, with the legacy of my father, especially. They were very frank about it.
Oh yes.
And also, before joining architecture, it was sort of unsaid understanding, I think, that everyone's practice is their own. So I don't get to just seamlessly join. There is some studio in waiting, that after I complete my studies, if you start your studies in architecture, you follow your own sort of path.
At this point, I would like to introduce that she is daughter of the great Mansee Raje sir, whom I also had a choice or chance, rather, to really get education from. So yes, of course,
Yeah,
it
so
matters.
it is,
matters.
and he was a very engaged father. I think he really
He was
enjoyed
engaged teacher as well.
He just So we were very close as a family and also as just a father-daughter relationship. Friends, father, everything rolled into one. So therefore, I think even that conversation, whether I realize the full impact of it or not, at least we have that. That there will come a time when you may begin to feel burdened by either being in the shadow or the legacy, and that is just the nature of the beast.
But for me, that came much later. But to join architecture as a
it was one of the possibilities. Actually, I was most fascinated.
So you flew into it, or what happened?
I was aware of it, that I was interested in, but I was interested in building.
Yeah, that's what
because I would go to construction sites either with father or mother, either one. So it was intriguing, of course. I don't think I enjoyed, though. I never thought of it as an aesthetic profession. I actually thought of it more as a profession to make things. And so I was interested in design also. So NID was an option. And that is when we did have a conversation, my father and I, because I had got into NID as well. And that exam was before the architecture exam in the scheme of things. And he had told me, if this is what you're interested in, go through 5 years of architecture, then you open yourself up to very many things.
Yes.
You can become a product designer with an architectural education, at least that's what he said. But the other way around, you can't become an architect then, just because of professional.
This is the advice which is important.
This was the advice I was given. But my hot favorite subject, actually, besides design or building, I love biology. And I wanted to actually be a genetic engineer.
Good.
So I think maybe next life or something.
No, I think it is related somewhere.
I continue to be fascinated by all things in terms of human, whether it's behavior, anatomy, cognition, even where tangentially I kind of keep aware of what are the advances in genetics and things like that. So
it's interesting. So you need to find some kind of convergence with
some parts. I don't know what happened. I think maybe it was the thing that I might have had to go to Delhi to do the course, and I wasn't particularly keen on Delhi.
Okay, because in that time and at that age, we had to take these kind of practical courses.
Yeah. I wouldn't have mind going to Bombay or Bangalore, but somehow Delhi didn't fascinate me. So I was like, okay, fine, maybe let's try this architecture now.
In the central belt of India, we have some resistance to Delhi.
Some assumptions about Delhi, which I'm sure are not true, but still.
Okay, that brings us to the next stage of your probably life or career, I'll say. So while you were doing architecture, and you already mentioned a little bit that you were already informed about the shadow of a great man and all those, towards the end of the career, what was the kind of feeling probably you were having about practicing, working, or masters, or going here or there? Because as you rightly said, in your case, probably your parents are not looking for an educated boy immediately. But in many cases, there have been also situations where a girl is completely
expected to go to the next phase,
settle down, kind of. But how was it? I mean, you have to now recall. How was it like? Were you thinking about practicing or going abroad, or what kind of things are going on? What kind of goosebumps, let's say?
I had itchy
feet. That architecture is going to be over. What next?
I definitely had itchy feet. I wanted to, because I think while in SEP doing undergrad, one of the great things that I can remember right off the bat, more than the courses we took or anything else, is that we learned to travel.
Yes.
I already had that before joining architecture through my family, but whether it's through RSPs, whether it's
Yes.
through informal, weekend trips.
That's the professional's
There was a
duty.
culture almost in SEPT, especially of just getting on an ST bus or third class train and going somewhere. And up until that time, my parents, even though my father kept going abroad to teach, he used to teach in the States or wherever else they would go, strangely, they never took my sister and me. It was always my mom and dad who would go travel. And that time we would go stay with either relatives or grandparents or something. And once or twice we had asked my parents, why take us also? And they would also always say, go on your own steam, then you will value it more.
Yes.
So you go when you can either are invited to or afford to or however it is. So exchange in SEPT, the exchange program was my first introduction to traveling abroad. And I remember coming back and realizing that as good as the SEPT education was in terms of giving us a foundation, there are so many more things to know. And so many different ways to approach things. Because I remember when we were in Delft, for instance, that's where I had gone for the exchange, just the way some other group of students would approach a problem.
Just look at things, yes.
Was different. The way they would frame or articulate something was different. The way they would draw or choose what to make in terms of a model was different. So you kind of got curious. What's going on here? So that is the only thing I had. That after I finished my undergrad, I need to explore a little more. Because however rigorous the SEPT training was, it was a type of training.
Yes.
And I felt I just needed to know more. So whether it was through working with somebody or masters, I always knew that I wanted to go near or far, but outside the familiar. And the familiar really for me was like the Ahmedabad school of thought kind of a thing. Yeah. And so then I think what I did was I took a year between finishing at SEPT and applying. And that time I taught with my father, like assisted basically. Not taught, but assisted my father in his teaching. And then at the end of that period I went for grad school.
Where did you went for?
To the States. Very strangely, since I'd already experienced Europe through exchange, the choice at that time was either the UK or the US.
Yes.
Also because that time we didn't have that much access to many other cultures.
Also language probably.
And language was a huge problem.
Because you were in Netherlands.
Yeah. So, and somehow, I don't know, the UK didn't appeal to me. I thought it would be very conservative in terms of its outlook on the UK, but not that I did any great research on it. This was just a sense based on people I had met, etc., etc. And the other thing that really attracted me about the US as I started applying was that schools of architecture were always part of larger universities.
Yes, and built environment.
Yeah.
It was more under discipline of built environment or environmental design.
And then the larger university, you were allowed to take courses in them.
Yes. So you can do
that
biology
was just
as well.
fascinating, Or like German studies or philosophy or that bit I thought was, a reason why you would do a master's to expand your mind and worldview. SEPT being just a private university at that time, it wasn't a part of the Gujarat University, so it was solely focused on the built environment.
Yes.
So it was rigorous but very focused. So I wanted something absolutely complementary to that.
I think that in our time we did not have that liberty to really take other subjects along with a focused discipline. And that is also one of the reasons I see many of us in our age group had this, itch to do something more also. Having gone through the architecture, feeling that there is something
and
less.
It's so connected. But we don't quite know what these connections. We were given a little flavor of that because at that time the curriculum had humanities.
Yes, and humanizing cities we did.
But just, they were glimpses.
And
not
also in our
really.
courses we had this interaction with people, which also actually put questions on us that
Yeah.
is it only about building?
Yeah,
or something
exactly.
more?
Something deeper or something just broader, however you chose to. And of course, the last bit was there was a certain anonymity going to the States. That
And
of course
finding
played a
out
part.
what is there.
Yeah,
in the
and
new place.
nobody would know me as Raje's
Yeah,
daughter in that sense. Not that I resented it, but it's
You
nice to
explore.
sort of
Yes.
see and live through that difference as well when nobody knows you.
I understand, because both of us have now traveled so much abroad. Going to a new place is very refreshing,
Yeah.
because you start knowing the place, people from scratch.
Yeah,
And
and
also you yourself is a new person in that place.
absolutely, and your senses are sharp because
You have
you're
to
trying
be
to
able
find
do
anchors and you're trying to sort of make relationships and meet that
very
place.
refreshing
Yeah.
and very energizing actually.
And I think that has remained.
So that remains with our profession and the way we are now leading our lives. It also
So
continues.
motivation was not really a master's degree. I mean, of course, it was important.
Yeah.
I got it and all of that.
But
it was just this
self-exploration
wanderlust
more,
and
yes. I can
exploration.
imagine that. I can imagine it.
Yeah.
So how was it during the US, and what next? Because this what next question is actually the entire thing.
And there is always that.
As
As
even
a course,
today, we have it, what next?
Even when a project is coming to a close, you're wondering, where do I go next? So that always remains with us.
So what happened then, post degree?
You know, you
master's?
will laugh. When I was in my second year, my final year of my master's, what I really wanted to do at that point is to go work for this Catalan architect, Enrique Miralles. But when I was in my second year at Cornell, he passed away with a brain hemorrhage or tumor or something. He was very young, 54 or something. So I had kind of put all my eggs in that basket that after this I will go work with him for a while. Then
slowly we get clarity also, what kind of work
and
we would like
I
to do.
genuinely kind of liked what he was doing and things of that sort. So when he passed away, I was like, oh, I guess
where do I go?
I don't know. I wasn't ready to return to India. I didn't even know if I wanted to return to India. There was this freedom and
the sense of freedom,
the sense
and
of kind of being, and also not this burden of others asking you what next.
Yes. I think we all face this situation that whenever we are coming to a closure, especially in career, degrees are going to be felicitated, and then everybody is asking what next. So
then
what next we have in our mind, but
sometimes
we don't want others to ask
because you don't want to so definitely articulate it. You want a little bit of sort
finding.
So at that time, my then boyfriend shifted to Colorado. I thought I would go maybe to the West Coast just for a difference, because East and West Coast are so different. And that summer, prior to going to LA, who I was going and working with, I had a couple of sort of job offers. So I said, okay, fine, let's go, see what happens. But summer I stayed with my boyfriend at the time in Colorado. And I really liked the place. It was very quiet. Although I didn't know a single architectural practice or an architect of repute from there, what I liked was precisely that there was not too much intellectualism or too much of a self-consciousness about the architecture profession. And also on the East Coast now, Mansee, I felt I was talking a lot.
East Coast is like
before building, I was talking about architecture way too much, and I felt I had no sense. What had, in a sense, interested me when I was young in building, I was losing a sense of that.
Probably getting more molded. We call it education is enslaving. So
and there was this compulsion to frame conversations on architecture and even thinking through that in a particular way. And I had some really wonderful young professors in architecture in Cornell who all since are doing their own things. They're not in Cornell anymore. But through them, I had anyway begun to discover certain, kind of the importance of irony, the importance of questioning, framing questions through architecture, and I wanted to continue doing that in a little quiet rather than through academia or some highly stylized or intellectualized practice or something. So I said, okay, fine. And I saw that in Colorado, people were just building modestly, with a little bit of humility. They knew that the stars were on the coasts, and that theirs was a much sort of gentler, more modest lot, at least at that time. Colorado was that way.
Not anymore. I visited.
Yeah, and it's gentrifying and everything. But at that time, it was I felt a very honest place where one could just learn the trade of the profession in its nuts and bolts. And I ended up staying there 10 years.
Wow.
In this one office, which started actually as a production firm before I joined. And a couple of years before I joined, they had started taking on design commissions. So as a design practice, it was very young. And I enjoyed the people there.
Which means more things for you to do.
Yeah, but not immediately. The first couple of years, I was also part of teams. But I remember just enjoying learning how to make a drawing set, for instance, how to manage a project on the construction site, learning systems. Again, this whole business of putting things together, reconnecting with that. So I enjoyed it and started getting involved even in terms of the cultural and the sort of community organizations and lives, whatever the other interests were took over. It was a nice place to live. Didn't have the sort of drumbeat of a New York or something, which is big city throb and all of that. No, it was quiet. You could do your own thing. So yeah, I found Colorado by accident, but now it's my second home.
Yeah, and now I was coming to that because now I know that you are doing a lot of things. Besides architecture also, you are teaching at CEPT, you are also doing a lot of things in the US and also in India. So it's like again back to the multifunctionality which I was talking about, which women love to do or they end up doing. I don't know really.
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit
I would like to know where are you today, because you are everywhere now. So how do you manage the work-life balance and working? What are you working on these days?
So my practice is by and large a sole practice. So that way it's easy because my work travels with me, my office travels
very
with
similar to me.
Yeah. Last 2 years I did have a young architect, Manthan, working with me. He has recently left because everyone has to find their own sort of path. So I sort of, my balance is mostly in the diversity of the kind of work I do. And I like to think that my life is an extension of that. There isn't a separation.
To find out.
So I take on architectural commissions, definitely. I love to teach. Actually, I think teaching in all formats is what I really love. And a lot of the times the things I teach in studio, my methods also, in terms of the way I choreograph the design process for the students, are questions and observations that I have when I'm practicing.
And also would like to do or missed something in my education.
Absolutely, but it's always my work somehow is intimately linked, or the way I work, let's put it that way, in the practice, finds itself in the way I conduct studios, or if I conduct workshops, which are more exploratory, experimental, because they're of shorter duration. Even they are dealing with questions that anyway arise when I'm practicing.
Yeah, because we are trying to link both.
Yeah, exactly. And that link, I think, is critical. I don't believe in, you are one avatar in
Full-time
your
consultant
profession,
or
and then
full-time
you are
teacher.
another avatar in your teaching methods.
I think this is something which I am also figuring out the
Yeah.
more I am talking to women, that they have really found a sense in this balance of doing work and teaching. When I say work, it is more about building per se. So because there has to be exchange of knowledge in both.
Yeah,
Neither is complete.
absolutely.
And somehow women are either striving for it, some have struck the balance in terms of teaching as well as practicing, and also extending it to research, because the moment you try to link both, there is a research involved.
There's a writing and reflection involved,
yes,
and also
involved.
sometimes one of the things that I like to do a lot is, and this was through Colorado because I was doing a lot of projects that were school projects, public school projects there. And I realized that I was actually interested in the field of education itself.
Yes. The pedagogical exploration.
Whether it is early education, middle school, high school education, university, liberal education versus more what they call STEM, science, technology, all of that. Just conversations around education I found myself always being a part of, so that is another extension of my practice. That most of my practice, my projects now emerge from when the client has no site, no program, they just have some sense of wanting to do something.
Build the idea.
Yeah, and that is the point where I like to get involved, whether a building is going to follow, or if I myself recommend to those clients, there is already a building here, you don't need a new building, and you can easily reoccupy the building with very minimal work. So I don't mind that. Like we were talking about.
Also, we talked about the feminism in
exactly that,
where we are not looking for projects per se to do a project and get money out of it. It has to be more sensible way of looking at the.
It's really interesting. It's almost like, I don't want to generalize here so much, but I feel women in design and education field, we don't necessarily seem to need a physical marker, monument to our idea.
And also, by the way, that is also a hindrance in our identity.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we are not doing full-time building, and buildings are given identity, and architects get their identity through buildings.
Yeah.
And as women, we are somehow questioning the very idea of architecture indirectly. That do you have to build all the time? Or you also need to retrospect on the
or just build less. Sometimes.
Do adaptive and things like that.
Yeah.
Then it falls into these domains of not doing pure architecture per se. I mean, if you look at it that way. Although the domain itself is now expanding, and we are talking about architecture is more. But one can see some reflection from your childhood, that when you were talking about this exploration was there.
Yeah.
It still continues.
Because you're exploring your profession. Through all this, you're also fundamentally asking yourself and the profession, what is it to be an architect?
Yes.
Rather than take that as a
given. We are asking the question,
Yeah.
and because this work is more about women, we need not comment on what men are thinking and asking. I think we are in a better situation where we are able to introspect and also retrospect in that. That we are able to ask questions.
Absolutely.
We are not just following what's going on
Exactly.
everywhere.
That's not accept the status quo of what the profession is. Male, female is just one debate. But if we don't ask questions, then you do wonder whether you're building responsibly, whether you're building well.
But you will see a pattern in this, that women are asking questions. Probably that is where they are also taking a step back.
Yeah.
And that's where my next question also.
Or we sidestep the status quo. Rather than that, we are like, we do this.
I guess the target is not to make more buildings or not to make more money. Also keeps us a little bit in the questioning mode. I don't know which one is first or second, but the fact that we question, then we also respond accordingly.
Yeah.
We are not blindly following what has been asked to us, or probably clients don't come to us because we question. I don't know what's there, but there is definitely a pattern where women have really taken a different route to architecture.
Or the other thing is that I love most of my clients, and since I work by myself, and my sort of colleagues and team are actually the engineers and the other consultants I work with, what I've begun realizing is that therefore then the clients that do come to you genuinely enjoy working with you.
And say both ways.
And that is then
dedicated.
The best scenario, no?
Yes.
Because
They're
then you don't have
to
anything to complain about, at least in that way.
They trust you, that's why.
They trust, respect, and mutually.
Yes.
They all, and that trust and respect, I have found, comes because you also are good at listening.
Yes, that's very important.
Not really as a sort of a corporate tagline, you know,
Yeah,
but really, truly,
you know?
that I'm interested in where my clients are coming from. I may not in the beginning have anything in common with one or the other, but the fact is that you want to take the time because you're curious to first get to know them in order to then build for them.
So it's building for them rather than what you think is better building for them.
Partly. The fact that there is a little bit of you that will always be, but that's for you.
Yes.
That my sort of...
That we follow what their need is.
And the art in my profession is for me. And
the need.
There are desires there as well. But I don't need to thrust that on anybody else.
Yeah. I think that's also a change in approach, the way we deal with projects or situations.
Yeah.
Because there are not many ways where you can approach, particularly in this case of architecture, where you do either what you want to do, whether you do what they want to do, or you strike a balance. To find out.
I love to ask I love to create a situation actually where it's not about the individual need at all, whether it's the client or the architect. It is about what does the project need. And therefore, everyone, in a way, is working towards not their ego.
But for the project.
Yeah, which is not to say that these things don't arise and there aren't conflicts or in some cases some tricky situations to navigate. But the point is, it's not about you liking pink and I liking blue as an architect client. Yeah, it's so irrelevant, that question. And clients also like that.
Has been very less in women's practice. That is also a pattern which can be seen very well when I'm reading.
But I really think that perhaps it is relevant, especially today. It always was, but especially in today's times, it is relevant.
It is relevant because now if we want to talk about architecture as a profession, inclusivity is very important. Sustainability is very important. And somehow women have really managed to question these things and even address in their work. Even if they do not, or some people, women have managed to do it, but even if they do not have managed to make monumental architecture projects which can make them famous, for example. But they have intervened in a very much, let's say, desired state and in a very sensitive manner. That is also a pattern which is very clearly evident, right from when we were talking about Brinda Somaya, for example. We just
it's this kind of where to touch with a certain amount of heft, but then where also to touch lightly. And both are equally important, depending on what the context is, but one has to be open to that.
I think also that we are able to take a step back and look at what is the need, rather than taking a step forward and thinking that this is what I need. This is, I think, a very important difference we have. Because probably the goal of the career is not really to reach somewhere, but to deliver something which is of more
and also
importance.
that your life and your career is the most intimate experiment you can do. So why go towards set markers? Because then there's no experimenting.
There is the race.
So there is no discovery in that sense.
We merged one of the questions which I was trying to find out, their work-life balance, but actually kind of people like you and even I put myself in that category, living the...
because sometimes, and given that mine's a small, tight practice, if I'm for a week interested in a cooking form, I may 1 week take off and learn about that, but the lessons of that making relationship between things persists.
Will remain. Yeah.
So some very close colleagues of mine also tend to do that a lot, so that they continue to explore, continue to discover that which intrigues them, and then as architects you find and you make a relationship to your practice or to your teaching in some way to your profession, but you don't force it. But that curiosity has to remain. So I hope I never reach a stage where I only now say, now I only have to consolidate.
And I know everything.
Yeah, I know everything. Now it is a matter of consolidating by base.
So why do you think, I mean, now these are some general questions because some of the things that you already touched upon. How do you think that being a woman has really mattered in this profession to you personally? And I mean, follow-up is a question, what do you see around being a woman in the profession?
So I was always, so here is how I became conscious about the gender.
When was it?
It was very strange actually. It was in a way I never expected it. And that is much later, so maybe a few years.
Was very different, no?
A few years after graduating and things, when some colleagues had already established practices, and a lot of the times you see a spousal partnership. At least I saw that a lot amongst my friends. And when it came to talking about the partnership's work, what I started realizing was, strangely, mainly at that time at least, it was always the men who were presenting the projects. And that is, and because both the partners would be friends of mine, I would feel comfortable, in the evening or something over dinner or drinks, asking them, but we went to school together, why is this one giving the lecture and not that one? And when I started seeing that as a pattern, now there are exceptions, but when I started seeing that as a pattern is the first time I realized, whatever happens, I have to be, in a way, at least, without getting too precious about it, I have to be mindful and guarded in the sense I have to take care of my authorship.
Yes.
That I can't just give it away to somebody.
But a lot of women have, knowingly, unknowingly, intentionally, unintentionally. I also had some informal conversations on this. But why do you think women end up in this situation? Of course, the profession was patriarchal in the past. But this is still a common trend which we see. I mean, we can name many of architects in Ahmedabad itself who are practicing in a spousal situation, but the name that is known is of the man. In this, both situations are there. It is also by the society, and it is also the choice which the partners together they make. What do you think about this situation? Because you now said that you realize this difference. And we have all our friends in this situation. So what do you think about it?
I won't mention the more obvious ones, perhaps in terms of taking care of family, better at multi. All that I won't go through. It may these days
does matter. It does matter.
I got the sense, and this sometimes is also when I talk to women of generations previous to me, those who were not single women, always somehow felt that the profession requires a single-mindedness and a focus and a certain dhoon, a certain sort of obsession. And in order to handle, so the day-to-day of the project, yes, but then in order to sort of extrapolate that to lectures, to talking about, to reflecting, the level of obsession that is needed, and and I think it's a myth, but that was the myth that I felt, that for that my life is very scattered, and therefore may as well we make a choice, and perhaps because in a society like ours, by and large, of course there are exceptions, the lot of multitasking falls to the woman in the household. She seeds becoming obsessed about the profession to the male counterpart, is what my feeling is. It might be controversial, I don't know, but this is the sense I got.
Also change.
So a lot of the times, women I have spoken to, I don't think are helpless. They will always counter it with saying, but this is a choice we have made. And I respect that.
I remember this also told to me by one of the senior members in this community, that it's the choice we have to make at some point in time, and the first level choice starts the moment we choose to have a partner from the same profession.
The other thing is, somehow I feel, and that might be societal, because this I've been asked several times, wanting to know socially now, not architecturally, whether I'm attached to someone or not. The idea of a single woman is only now, in the last decade or 2 decades, emerging as not something where either you're waiting for a partnership to happen, or a partnership has broken off, or that somehow you have been unlucky in not making a partnership.
You were seen as an individual now. It's a big change. We can see the difference when we started than today.
And the idea that establishing a household is not necessarily important. Being someone who is only immersed in one's work is socially, whether respectable or not, is just the reality.
It's acceptable, more acceptable
and
now.
You accept it first as something like, I am not waiting for somebody to come along and give me companionship.
That's true.
So sometimes I feel maybe the concerns are not necessarily directly linked to whether I'm a good designer or not, or women are more interested in details and men are more interested in broad strokes. These are all, I think, cliches which maybe we are sort of moving past.
We have grown past that.
But socially, to kind of say, where is your home? Oh, I have roughly, I travel with my laptop and that's me.
That's office.
The idea of that is, we still don't have as many examples of that.
Yes.
To sort of...
Number is growing.
Number is growing.
So, we made the steps toward it.
Yeah. And there were a few people in the generation before me, like in India, people like Hema Sankalya.
Yes.
I remember a few of these women architects very fondly. Because they had in fact, I remember they had a certain confidence in their own person and their principles and their ability to fend off whatever was undesirable. Sometimes I feel even more than me.
Yeah, I guess actually the education provides that platform to both genders. And that is where also I had a curiosity, where does actually women give up? Or diversify. I will not say give up, or diversify, or take priorities in certain areas. And many of the women who choose to have husband as architect or not architect and then have children, they have more things to prioritize, what first and what next. And somewhere architecture or doing client business or being the face of the office becomes the least thing for them to really
which itself is now changing. I remember the first time I met Jeannie Gang, I remember being surprised myself that actually her partner, I don't know if she's married or if they're just partners, actually takes care in a sense of managing the office. And she is the face of the practice. And even first time I met her, because she was a friend of some very close friends, even which must have been a decade ago or something, I do remember feeling I haven't met too many such practices.
Very few. I
yeah,
think.
whether
Even
it's,
universally, this is will be very
yeah.
few.
Whether it is Jeannie Yang, whether it is Elizabeth Diller from Diller and Scofidio, where by choice the woman becomes the face of the office. That is when they have a large partnership. At my level, the only thing I've been very conscious about is the issue of authorship.
Yes.
And the authorship is not for ego. It is also taking accountability,
Yes.
therefore,
Yes.
for my failures as well.
Yes, both.
And that is why it's very important to me that everybody knows that it is me behind any decision I'm making,
Yes.
whether as a teacher or whether as
Yes.
a practitioner or in any other walk of life. Therefore, if something goes wrong, you come to me. You throw your bricks at me.
Yes.
I'm not going to fend it off to
It's
some
both
other
ways.
person.
I mean,
yeah, exactly. So as long as that happens, then you're sort of. I feel then at least one has claimed one's ground
Yes.
as a practicing professional.
So as you see now that things are changing and we see that pattern very strong, what is the message you have for the younger generation?
I really hope we arrive at a time where each one is, for instance, we don't have to qualify woman architect, Indian architect, architect from the subcontinent.
So you don't need that identity.
Architect missing an eye, crippled architect, some other.
Situation,
yeah.
We have that situation. So given that it is there in the society, so how can women of today can really see being a woman in the profession as an opportunity, and how can they really face the challenges?
The deep down message I have is, if you truly, first of all, you have to be doing something you enjoy. I know it's a cliche, and if you have found it, don't be afraid to be alone or to go it alone.
Yes, that's important. That's very important.
So that solitude.
You don't have to cling on to something.
Yeah. And don't be afraid of being alone. That solitude is actually going to help you become, to take accountability and enjoy your successes both.
Both is important.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very good and nice of you. And here we
Thank
come
you
to
so
an
much.
end of it. Thank you so much. And I will still have a 5-minute shot on water because of the course. Okay, you can disconnect and.